Otis Redding, incredible company. I would also like to offer my sincere congratulations to all past and present members of Deep Purple.
Ian Gillan is often hailed as one of the most iconic voices in rock history, but his legacy is as complicated as it is legendary. The frontman of Deep Purple, known for his soaring vocals, electrifying stage presence, and indomitable spirit, played a defining role in the sound that shaped 1970s hard rock. However, his brilliance came with a price. A tumultuous career marked by ego clashes, personal struggles, and internal band conflicts that left scars which have not fully healed. This examination takes a closer look at the life and career of Ian Gillan, delving into the tensions that brewed behind the scenes of Deep Purple, his complicated relationships with bandmates, and the personal challenges that were inseparable from his journey to stardom. In particular, the story of Gillan's battles with guitarist Ritchie Blackmore, his struggles with alcohol, and his strained marriage paint a vivid picture of a man whose genius was both his greatest strength and his most profound flaw. The rise of Deep Purple, a band at war with itself. Deep Purple's meteoric rise to stardom during the early 1970s positioned them at the forefront of the hard rock movement. Selling out arenas around the world, they became a quintessential part of the music scene, delivering electrifying performances that cemented their place in rock history. At the heart of the band was Ian Gillan, a frontman whose voice could soar to stratospheric heights, commanding the attention of audiences with every note. But as is often the case in the world of rock and roll, fame and fortune came with a dark underbelly. The band's internal dynamics were fraught with tension, ego clashes, and creative conflicts. While the members of Deep Purple were united in their ambition to make great music, their personalities were often at odds. Ian Gillan, with his fiery temperament, was at the center of this storm. Gillan's relationship with Ritchie Blackmore, Deep Purple's enigmatic and brilliant guitarist, was one of the most volatile. Blackmore, known for his stoic, perfectionist demeanor, was the polar opposite of Gillan's impulsive, unpredictable nature. Their creative tension produced some of Deep Purple's most iconic albums, such as Machine Head, but it also created a toxic environment where their constant clashes threatened to tear the band apart. Blackmore would often accuse Gillan of being unprofessional, while Gillan resented Blackmore's controlling and domineering attitude. This creative tension came to a head in 1973, when Gillan abruptly left Deep Purple, citing the unbearable tensions within the band and the exhaustion from the relentless touring schedule. His departure was a blow to the band's stability, leaving a void that would be difficult to fill. Enter David Coverdale, who took over as the band's new frontman. Coverdale's perspective: stepping into a band scarred by conflict. David Coverdale's arrival in Deep Purple was a turning point in the band's history. As he stepped into the role of lead singer, he found himself in a band already fractured by years of creative battles and personal animosities. For Coverdale, Gillan's shadow loomed large, not just as a former bandmate, but as a figure whose fiery presence had shaped the band's identity, both musically and emotionally. Looking back on his time in Deep Purple, Coverdale describes Gillan's departure as a turning point that left emotional scars that never fully healed. The tension between the band members, particularly between Gillan and Blackmore, had created an atmosphere that was not only creatively stifling, but emotionally exhausting. There was a shadow that lingered over everything, Coverdale recalls, and that shadow was Ian. While Coverdale was able to bring a new energy to Deep Purple, the unresolved conflicts from Gillan's time with the band remained a part of the group's DNA. For those who had worked with Gillan, his legacy was not just one of musical brilliance, but of a man whose passion and intensity were often difficult to navigate. The complex dynamics of Deep Purple: egos, clashes, and creative tensions. Though Blackmore was the most infamous of Gillan's adversaries, the tension within Deep Purple was not limited to just these two iconic figures. The internal dynamics of the band were like a powder keg, with Gillan's fiery temperament often sparking conflicts that could escalate from minor disagreements to full-blown confrontations. Drummer Ian Pace, a steady and pragmatic presence in the band, often found himself in the unenviable position of mediator during these explosive moments. Pace, who had a deep respect for Gillan's immense vocal talent, also recognized the volatility that came with working alongside him. Whether it was over the set list or the direction of a song, Gillan's intensity would frequently turn minor issues into full-blown disputes that threatened to tear the band apart. Pace would often have to step in to cool tensions, trying to keep the band's creative energy intact despite the chaos unfolding behind the scenes. Bassist Roger Glover, who had a more reserved and introspective personality, also found himself at odds with Gillan's mood swings. Though their creative collaboration produced some of Deep Purple's most iconic tracks, the emotional cost of working with Gillan was high. Glover often bore the brunt of Gillan's outbursts, and while the two shared a mutual respect for each other's talents, their professional relationship was strained by Gillan's volatile nature. The reunion. Old wounds reopened. In the mid-1980s, Deep Purple reunited with Ian Gillan at the helm, but the hope for a fresh start quickly faded as old wounds were reopened. The band's resurgence, particularly the sessions for their 1993 album The Battle Rages On, was marred by renewed tensions between Gillan and Blackmore. The album's title, reflecting the ongoing conflict within the band, became a grim reflection of the band's fractured state. During the recording of The Battle Rages On, Gillan's volatile relationship with Blackmore reignited, with both men's creative visions clashing in dramatic fashion. Blackmore, ever the perfectionist, found himself at odds with Gillan's more free-spirited approach to the material. The tension became unbearable, and the result was a creative stalemate that drained the energy from the band. Arguments were commonplace, with Gillan refusing to back down from his vision, while Blackmore withdrew into himself, becoming increasingly detached and frustrated. The rest of the band, caught in the crossfire, struggled to hold things together, but the rift between the two frontmen proved insurmountable. The breaking point. Blackmore's departure. The breaking point came during The Battle Rages On tour when Ritchie Blackmore, weary of the ongoing tension, made the decision to leave Deep Purple for good. His departure marked the end of an era and left a haunting question lingering in the air. Could Deep Purple have achieved even greater heights if the conflicts within the band had been resolved? Blackmore's departure did not signal the end of Deep Purple, but it did mark the loss of a key creative force, leaving the band to carry on without the guitarist who had been a driving force behind their early success. The personal struggles. Ian Gillan's private battles. Ian Gillan's personal life mirrored the chaos and intensity of his professional career. Born in 1945 in Hounslow, London, Gillan came from a working-class background that instilled in him a fierce drive to succeed. Ambition, however, is a double-edged sword, and for Gillan, the path to fame came at a significant personal cost. In the late 1960s, Gillan met his wife, Bron, a relationship that began with the optimism of young love. At the time, Gillan was still carving out his place in the music world, struggling to make a name for himself. Bron stood by him through the whirlwind of fame, weathering the pressures that came with being married to a rock star. However, fame has a way of testing relationships, and Gillan's rise to stardom brought with it the challenges of a life spent on the road. The demands of constant touring, long hours in the studio, and the pressures of life in the public eye took a toll on Gillan's marriage. For Braun, being married to a rock star meant long periods of absence and enduring the fallout of Gillan's volatile temperament. The gap between his public persona and private responsibilities grew wider as his career took off, leaving Braun to pick up the pieces of a relationship that often seemed to exist in two separate worlds. The struggles with alcohol, escaping the pressures of fame. As was common among many rock stars of the era, Ian Gillan struggled with alcohol, a coping mechanism that became a part of the hard-living lifestyle that defined the 1970s. As Deep Purple reached the peak of their success, alcohol became a way for Gillan to numb the unrelenting pressures of fame and success. Nights spent partying would often blur into mornings of exhaustion, and the cycle would repeat itself, leaving little room for reflection or self-care. Gillan's struggles with alcohol were not only felt in his health, but also in his relationships with those closest to him. For Braun, it meant witnessing the toll that alcohol took on the man she loved, unable to reach him in the midst of his self-destructive spiral. The drinking became both an escape and a burden, as it offered temporary relief from the stresses of fame while simultaneously creating new problems that would worsen the emotional toll on those around him. A turning point, confronting his demons. In the 1980s, Ian Gillan began to confront his demons, recognizing the damage that alcohol had caused to both his personal life and his health. It was a turning point, but one that came only after years of turmoil. Though Gillan was able to curb his drinking, the scars of those years remained, visible not just in his health, but in the relationships that had borne the brunt of his struggles. Today, Ian Gillan remains married to Braun, a testament to their resilience and the endurance required to survive the unpredictable world of rock and roll. Though their marriage has endured, it is clear that the journey has not been without its sacrifices, as the pressures of fame, alcohol, and a turbulent career have left their mark. Conclusion: the paradox of Ian Gillan's legacy. Ian Gillan's name is synonymous with some of rock's most iconic anthems, from Smoke on the Water to Child in Time. His soaring vocals and charismatic stage presence defined Deep Purple's sound, establishing him as one of the greatest frontmen in rock history. However, those who shared the stage, studio, or even a tour bus with him know that the man behind the voice was as divisive as he was inspiring. Gillan's genius was undeniable, but it came wrapped in a fiery temperament and a penchant for conflict that left scars as deep as his contributions to music. His legacy is a testament to the power of passion, but it is also a cautionary tale about the cost of greatness. The same intensity that made Gillan one of the most electrifying performers in rock also made him a figure who could alienate those closest to him. For all his brilliance, Ian Gillan's fiery nature has been both his greatest asset and his Achilles heel. His uncompromising approach to his craft drove Deep Purple to create some of rock's most iconic tracks, but it also alienated those around him, leaving a trail of strained relationships and unresolved tensions. The paradox of Ian Gillan's legacy is that his genius seems inseparable from his flaws. His unrelenting fire fueled his success, but it also burned bridges, leaving questions about what might have been had he been able to temper his passion. Ian Gillan's story is one of contrast, a man whose genius is matched only by his flaws. His name will forever be etched in the annals of rock history, but it will always be accompanied by the shadow of the struggles and conflicts that marked his career. His journey is a reminder that even the brightest stars cast long shadows, and that greatness often comes at a price.